Your chest is tight before your feet even hit the floor. Your mind is already running through everything that could go wrong today, and you haven't even had coffee yet. You tell yourself it's just stress. You tell yourself you're just wired this way. But what if that's not true? What if your anxiety isn't a flaw in your personality? It's a missing rhythm in your life. And somewhere between an ancient command written thousands of years ago and a discovery made in a modern lab, there's an answer neither one could give you alone. Here's what most of us do when anxiety shows up. We manage it, we white knuckle through it. We tell ourselves to relax, to calm down, to just breathe, as if a feeling that's been building for years can be talked down in 30 seconds. We treat anxiety like a wire that needs untangling in the moment it appears. But notice something. When God addressed this in his people, he didn't hand them a coping technique. He didn't say, think positive thoughts. He didn't say, manage your emotions better. He gave one command, and he gave it over and over until it was written into the rhythm of an entire nation's week. Stop. Not calm down. Not relax when you get a chance. Stop. On a schedule, whether you feel ready or not. And here's what should unsettle you. That command was given to people who had every reason to refuse it. People with harvests to bring in, animals to tend, work that never actually ends. And somehow, modern life, with more comfort, more free time, and more control over our own schedules than any generation before us, still cannot make itself do the one thing an ancient, exhausted culture was ordered to do every single week. To understand why we can't simply relax our way out of this, you have to understand what's actually happening underneath the feeling, because anxiety rarely starts where you notice it. It starts small. A stressor hits, a deadline, a conflict, a bill you can't quite cover. Your body responds the way it's designed to, a burst of alertness, a spike in your heart rate, a mind that sharpens to deal with the threat. That's not the problem. That response is not the enemy. The problem is what happens when that response never fully turns off, when the alarm stays half lit long after the danger has already passed. One stress response becomes repeated activation. Repeated activation becomes a raised baseline, your body's new normal resting state, quietly reset without your permission. And a body that's constantly primed for threat starts treating calm itself as unfamiliar, almost unsafe, like a language it no longer remembers speaking. Eventually, you stop saying, I'm going through a stressful season, and you start saying, I'm just an anxious person. The condition becomes the identity, and the identity becomes the excuse that keeps you from ever addressing the actual cause. But look at how Scripture talks about this. It never describes anxiety as a permanent nature, something baked into who you are, unchangeable, fixed at birth. It describes it as a state, a mind that can be renewed, a heart that can be recalibrated. You are not anxious the way you have brown eyes. You are anxious the way a system gets stuck in a pattern. And patterns, unlike identities, can change. Not through more effort in a single moment, but through a different rhythm repeated over time. Here's the science underneath that pattern, and it's simpler than you'd expect. Your body has a stress response system. Think of it as an internal alarm and recovery circuit. It's supposed to spike under threat and then fully reset once the threat passes. That reset is not optional, and it's not automatic just because you feel tired enough to want it. It's the part of the system that actually restores you, the part that lowers the internal temperature back to baseline instead of letting it simmer indefinitely. Now, picture an engine that's allowed to idle constantly. Never shut fully off, just quieted for a moment before revving right back up the second. Another notification, another demand, another worry pulls your attention. That's what a body without real rest is doing. It's not broken down, but it's never actually restored either. Nothing in that engine gets the chance to cool, repair, or reset. It just keeps running hot in the background, even while you sleep. Even while you tell yourself you had a relaxing weekend. This is exactly why relaxing when you get a chance doesn't fix anxiety. A scroll through your phone, a show at the end of the day, a nap on a Sunday afternoon, none of that reaches the part of your system that needs a full stop. Your body doesn't recover because you feel a little calmer for 20 minutes. It recovers because it's given an actual complete reset on a rhythm it can come to expect. And that's not something willpower produces in a random spare moment squeezed between obligations. That's something a practice has to be deliberately built around. Which brings us to a story that's easy to read past. A people who had spent generations as slaves in Egypt are finally free. And one of the very first instructions God gives them, before military strategy, before laws about property, before almost anything else, is a command to rest. One full day every week, no exceptions. Not for the wealthy, not for the exhausted, for everyone, including the servants and even the animals working the fields alongside them. Understand what this actually was. These were people who had only ever known forced, uninterrupted labor, people for whom stopping had never once been a choice available to them. Rest wasn't a reward you earned by finishing the harvest. It wasn't a bonus handed out once every obligation was satisfied. It was handed to them in the middle of their unfinished lives, before the fields were done, before the work was caught up, before anything was resolved. That should sound familiar. You don't stop when your inbox is empty because your inbox is never empty. You don't rest when the to-do list is finally cleared because something new fills it before the old list is even finished. You clock out of work and your mind keeps working anyway, replaying conversations, rehearsing tomorrow, running numbers you already ran 3 times before bed. You've mastered stopping your body. You've never learned to stop your mind, and no one ever taught you that those are two entirely different skills. Here's the truth underneath all of it. The strongest force shaping your daily state is not how you feel in a given moment. It's the rhythm your life is actually built around. You can have a wonderful, peaceful morning and still end the week anxious because one good morning was never the rhythm. It was an exception, a lucky break in an otherwise unrhythmed week, and exceptions don't retrain a nervous system. This is where Jesus enters the picture with the same pattern we just saw. He doesn't say, prove you're worthy of rest by finishing everything first. He doesn't say, get your life in order and then come find peace once you've earned it. He says, come to him already weary, already burdened. Mid-collapse, not after recovery, because he never designed the invitation to require recovery as the entry price. Think about how you treat your phone. You don't wait until it hits 1% and shuts off completely before you plug it in. You charge it on a rhythm, ahead of the depletion, because you already know exactly what happens if you wait until it's empty. You lose everything mid-task, at the worst possible moment. Yet with your own body and mind, you wait until you're running on fumes before you even consider stopping. And then you wonder, every single time, why the exhaustion never fully lifts, even after a weekend off. Here's something most people get completely wrong, and it keeps them stuck for years without ever realizing why nothing is improving. They assume rest just means doing nothing. Collapsing on the couch, scrolling until their eyes are tired and their thumb is sore, numbing out for a few hours before starting the exact same cycle again tomorrow. And they wonder why they never actually feel restored, no matter how many hours they spend doing nothing. But your nervous system doesn't respond to passive numbing the way it responds to a real bounded stop. Scrolling isn't rest. It's low-grade stimulation dressed up as rest, keeping the same alert circuitry lightly engaged the entire time. What your body is actually built to respond to is something ritualized, something with a clear beginning and a clear end. Something repeated on a fixed rhythm your system can learn to trust, the way it learns to trust any pattern it can predict. That's precisely what a weekly, structured stop was designed to be. Not a vague suggestion to relax more when you find the time, but a repeated signal your body could actually learn to recognize and respond to. There's another story that makes this even clearer, and it involves a moment right after one of the greatest victories in the Old Testament. A prophet has just faced down hundreds of opposing priests and watched fire fall from heaven in front of an entire nation. It's the high point of his life, the kind of moment most people would assume settles every fear for good. And almost immediately afterward, a single threat from one angry queen sends him running into the wilderness, terrified, praying that he could just die under a tree. Here's what should surprise you about what happens next. God doesn't rebuke him for the fear. He doesn't demand an explanation for how someone who just witnessed fire fall from heaven could fall apart over one threat a day later. Instead, an angel wakes him gently, gives him food, lets him sleep again, gives him more food a second time. And only after all of that, after the body has been fully cared for, does a single word of instruction finally come. Rest came before correction. Rest came before conversation. Because the collapse wasn't a spiritual failure that needed fixing. It was a body that had been running on empty for far too long and had finally hit zero. You are not disqualified from rest because you haven't gotten your act together yet. You are not required to fix your anxiety first and earn peace as the prize at the end. The offer comes in the collapse, not after it. The same way it came to a prophet lying exhausted under a tree. Most people fight anxiety at the branch level, a breathing exercise before a meeting, one good night's sleep after a stressful week, a single relaxing weekend that feels like it might finally fix everything. And for a moment it works. Until the following week when the same tightness in the chest shows back up right on schedule because the root was never touched. An unrhythmed life will always grow the same anxious branches back, no matter how many times you trim them off. Now, here's a lie worth naming directly, because it quietly traps a lot of well-meaning people who would never say it out loud. The lie that busyness is basically the same thing as faithfulness, that rest is something you have to justify or apologize for or earn through visible exhaustion first before you're allowed to stop. Somewhere along the way, constant output got quietly rebranded as virtue, and stillness got rebranded as laziness or even spiritual weakness. But nothing in the framework we've just walked through supports that. Rest wasn't given to the people who had finally proven themselves worthy of it. It was commanded into a fixed rhythm precisely because no one, left to their own judgment, will ever naturally choose to stop on their own. So here's what this actually looks like once you walk back into your week. When Sunday afternoon feels like the perfect time to finally catch up on everything you've fallen behind on, you stop anyway. When your body insists that one more hour of scrolling will help you unwind before bed, you close it and just breathe instead. When guilt whispers that resting is wasted time you can't afford this week of all weeks, you rest anyway, on purpose, on a rhythm you don't renegotiate every time it's inconvenient. Because the power was never in the absence of stress. Stress will always find you again, no matter how well the last stop went. The power is in the rhythm you return to, again and again, whether you feel like it or not, whether it's convenient or not. Whatever you consistently build your life's rhythm around is what your body will eventually expect as normal: chaos or rest, anxiety or peace. You don't drift into calm by accident. You build a rhythm toward it deliberately, the same way a whole ancient nation was once commanded to, whether they felt like it that week or not. If this gave you something worth sitting with, go ahead and like it, subscribe, and turn on notification so you don't miss the next one. Here's your challenge for this week. Pick 1 hour and set it apart completely. Phone away, nothing to produce, nothing to catch up on, no exceptions negotiated at the last minute. Before it starts, say one sentence out loud. I'm allowed to stop. Not because you've earned it, not because everything is finished, just because it's time. Do that once this week and pay attention to what starts to shift. I'll see you in the next one.